From kids developing the same liver disease once only seen in alcoholics, to rats choosing sugar over cocaine, this might be the most dangerous drug hiding in plain sight. But is it really your fault if you're addicted?
Sugar, or sweet tastes, I should say to be more specific, have an incredibly potent ability to activate dopamine release within the mesolimbic reward pathway.
Fructose is addictive, activates the nucleus accumbens, the reward center of the brain, in the same way that cocaine, heroin, nicotine, alcohol do.
But indeed, this is true. High fructose corn syrup and sucrose are exactly the same. They're both equally bad. Okay? They're both dangerous. They're both poison.
And carbohydrates are certainly addictive. Fructose actually is chemically addictive. It gives a dopamine response to the addiction centers of your brain, just like cocaine, heroin, meth, gambling. And we can measure this, and we can track this.
In this video, we'll break down why our biology is wired to crave sugar, how the food industry weaponized that craving against you, and what you can do so quitting doesn't feel impossible. The 1970s were a massive turning point in nutrition because this is when all of the blame was shifted onto fat. This all traced back to Ancel Keys and his infamous 7 country study, which demonized fat but conveniently let sugar off the hook. So once fat became the villain, the food industry pounced on this, stripping fat out of products and replacing it with sugar, selling it as a health food. That's when the real epidemic began, and even cereals like Cheerios loaded with sugar were suddenly considered heart healthy, simply because they were low in cholesterol. Obesity, diabetes, fatty liver disease, they've all skyrocketed since then. Not just because junk food was more convenient, but because even our home-cooked meals are now built on a completely different fuel source. As a result, the average American consumes roughly 80 grams of sugar per day, and that's not even counting the carbohydrates that all break down into sugar in the body. But here's the key point that most people miss. Glucose and fructose are not the same. Glucose is a universal fuel, every cell in your body can use it, and if you don't eat it, your body can make it. Fructose, on the other hand, is completely different. Your body has no essential need for it, which means it goes straight into the liver. And once it's there, fructose is metabolized almost identically to alcohol. Same byproducts, same fat accumulation, same progression to insulin resistance and fatty liver. And that's why we now see children being diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, a condition that until the 1990s only really existed in alcoholics. The only difference is that alcohol makes you feel drunk, while sugar does the same damage quietly with no immediate warning sign. But what if sugar isn't just acting like alcohol in your body, but also stimulating your brain like cocaine? Is it really your fault that sugar feels impossible to quit, or is it just an evolutionary mismatch? Roughly 300,000 years of survival instincts colliding with a food system designed to exploit them. The truth is, sugar addiction is hardwired into our biology, and because of this, the food industry has figured out exactly how to weaponize it against us to make a profit. For almost all of human history, sugar was very rare. Therefore, if you stumbled across ripe fruit or honey, binging on it made sense. It was a quick, safe hit of energy that could mean the difference between survival and starvation. But back then, a sweet hit of fruit was about as sweet as a carrot. That's right, even these so-called natural foods today are nothing like what our ancestors ever saw. A wild apple 1,000 years ago was tiny and sour and maybe closer to a crab apple. But modern apples, bananas, and grapes, they've all been selectively bred for centuries to be bigger, juicier, and engineered for maximum sweetness. The fruit aisle in your supermarket is basically candy disguised as being natural. And that's exactly why the craving stuck in our gene pool. There was never a strong enough negative selection pressure to remove it. Then came refinement. Just like chewing cocoa leaves gives a mild buzz, but refining them turns them into cocaine, creating a powerful drug. A stalk of sugarcane chewed slowly with all of its fiber delivers sweetness gradually. But strip out all the fiber and concentrate the juice, and suddenly you've got a substance that's 10 times sweeter than nature intended. And once the food industry realized this mismatch, they doubled down. They discovered the bliss point, the exact combination of sugar, fat, and salt that maximally lights up your dopamine system. That's why almost all packaged foods today now have added sugar. Not just soda and candy, but bread, yogurt, pizza sauce, salad dressings, all carefully engineered to keep you hooked. And to make matters worse, kids are now bombarded with over 30,000 junk food ads every year, priming them for addiction before they even hit adulthood. So what's the solution? You really only have two options. Eat carbohydrates and sugar in their most natural form, which is likely still suboptimal, or B, eliminate them completely and only eat red meat. After all, dietary carbohydrates and sugar are not essential. Our bodies actually run far more efficiently in a low carb or no carb state by creating ketones and creating any of these small amount of glucose that we do need through gluconeogenesis. Now, of course, knowing sugar is not essential and actually cutting it out are two very different things. That's why I created my Stoium Reset protocol that makes cutting out sugar effortless by default, because willpower alone almost never works. But why is sugar truly so addicting? In one famous study, rats were given the options between two bottles, one laced with cocaine and the other laced with sugar. Not only did most end up preferring the sugar-laced water bottle, but even the already cocaine-addicted rats still preferred the sugar. They even went as far as walking across electrified mats in order to get more. So what does this mean for humans? You might think, sure, those are just rats. But in people, sugar lights up these same reward pathways. It builds tolerance, meaning you need more and more to get the same hit. Because of this, when you try to cut back, you don't just crave it, you can actually get withdrawal symptoms like headaches, irritability, and fatigue. And it gets even worse. Fructose found in fruit juice and high fructose corn syrup is even more addictive than straight glucose. And the damage doesn't stop at your brain. All of that fructose goes straight into your liver. That's why kids today are being diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, a condition that only used to exist in alcoholics. But here's the key nuance. There are certain fats that can actually help the liver recover. This research suggests that saturated fat can actually help the liver recover, while industrial seed oils do the opposite. They keep the inflammation going and, in some cases, make the damage worse. So sugar might be the spark that lights the fire, but pairing it with the wrong kind of fat, you're basically just dumping gas on top of it. The main difference, unlike cocaine or alcohol, is that it's not as easy to just opt out. Not only because sugar is hidden in almost everything that you eat, but because most people don't even realize it's a problem in the first place. And that's the main trap. Sugar doesn't just hijack your brain and wreck your liver, it breaks your entire metabolic system. See, your body was designed to run on two fuels, sugar or fat. But the combination of the two is where things really start to break down. The two main fuel sources for your mitochondria, the little engines inside of your cells, is fat and carbohydrates. The Randle cycle kicks in when your cells are flooded with too much fuel, especially when fat and carbs show up together. At that point, the cell's energy system gets jammed and it prioritizes one fuel while blocking the other. Glucose use often slows down and sugar starts backing up in the blood. And the sugar in the blood isn't just there harmlessly, it starts sticking to proteins in a process called glycation. Think of it as caramelizing your insides. Glycation gums up your system, making tissues stiff, fragile, and inflamed. So your body scrambles to fix it. Therefore, it spikes insulin to get the sugar out of your bloodstream and store it as fat. But when this happens over and over non-stop, this eventually leads to insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. Now, technically, this is why some people claim to thrive on an extremely high sugar diet, like the sugar diet. If you only eat sugar or carbs with very little fat, you're mostly running on one fuel, so you don't trigger the Randle cycle traffic jam. But while you may feel fine in the short term, the long-term effects are far more questionable. Diets like this often lack the essential nutrients your body actually needs, which makes sense when you realize humans evolved eating mostly meat for the majority of our history. So while the Randle cycle was meant to protect your cells from energy overload, in today's environment of constant sugar and fat combos, it actually backfires. Therefore, instead of keeping you safe, it traps you in a vicious cycle of blood sugar spikes, fat storage, and long-term metabolic damage. So the main reason sugar feels impossible to quit is not because you're weak, but because you're human. For hundreds of thousands of years, our biology was wired to crave that rare sweetness. But in today's world, that survival instinct collides with an environment where sugar is everywhere while being refined, concentrated, and engineered to keep you hooked. That's the evolutionary mismatch, and the food industry knows it. So is it really your fault that you're addicted? Well, no, but it is your responsibility to break free. It's not your fault that you crave it, but once you see the trap for what it is, you have the power to step out of it.